Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to HomeGames. I'm afraid I don't know the word for HomeGames in Danish. Otherwise, you better be sure that I'd be saying it. It's me back in the hot seat after several weeks, I think. So we'll see if I can remember how to do this. And I'm joined today by the fantastic Rachel Treece of FTS Global. Hello, Rachel. How are you?
Very well, thank you very much. I'm English, as you can hear by the accent, so very excited about tonight.
Well, we won't hold that against you. As we just been discussing, you married the right way, I believe, to a fine Scotsman. So that's all good. So I'm sure we may get into some of all that kind of stuff. See if the Welsh contingent has joined us, and we'll be interested to know which way Kate's going to be voting with her feet tonight, as well. So we're going to be. This isn't so much of an industry chat today. I'm sure we'll touch on some of that because your company, Rachel, does do stuff with the financial industry, but loads of other industries too. But it's going to be about people. It's going to be about coaching. So a little bit of a different and wider topic to which platform is doing particularly well or whatever. And I'm really looking forward to it. Before we dive into it, there are quite a lot of new names. I think, Rachel, you've brought your own audience with you.
Oh, have I?
So that's quite exciting. Hello, everybody. So I'll just do, I'm afraid all of you regulars, you know all this stuff already, but bear with. So the idea of today is we'll chat for 45 minutes. We don't need to solve the world. We just want to have a good conversation and give you something to think about during your Wednesday lunchtime. The chat is open and I'll be watching that. So if you see me looking away, I'm not ignoring Rachel. I might be ignoring Rachel, but it won't be because of that. And I'll be looking at chat. So if you've got questions you want to ask Rachel, and I'm sure you will, because we've got some really good topics to discuss today, stick them in there. Or there's an ask a question button down the bottom, and if you press that, you can type in a little question. It will flip up a little thing on my screen, and I'll make sure that we get to your question. If you have any sound or video issues, I'm not totally sure this does anything, to be honest, but there's a link going in the chat, so you can press that, and it delays your feed and hopefully sorts out any nonsense that you may or may not be experiencing. If the nonsense you are experiencing is the nonsense that we are talking, it won't actually do anything at all. So it won't make the content any better. It's completely informal. Anything can happen and regularly does. So do please get stuck in. And if you don't, it'll just be me and Rachel talking shite for the next 45 minutes. And it won't surprise you to know that swearing is completely allowed as well. For those of you who are in the industry, in the financial services industry, and particularly if you're an advice professional on the call, it is that time in the quarter where we whine and beg and bleat and plead and ask you to spend 4 or 5 minutes rating the platforms that you use. You'll see a green button at the bottom of your screen. That's a link to a short survey. Many of you have done so before, and we're always very, very grateful. We're super grateful when you do it. This stuff all feeds into Platform Analyzer, and so if you're using Analyzer, either the free or the paid version, you can filter platforms based on their service rating. This is what drives the service rating, so it's really, really important that we do get a sense of how things are going at the moment for you, and all your experiences are valid. George, you are a top man, albeit from West Sussex. But there we go. Right. So I think that's enough of all that. Let's dive in. Rachel, we first met, a little bit before lockdown, I think?
Before lockdown. I think it was my last drinky before lockdown. My last business trip before
lockdown. You're based in Luxembourg, aren't you?
I am, yes.
So I think you're the very first person to dial in from not the UK. It's very exciting. Not really, though. No, it's quite exciting, and we'll maybe talk a little bit about that as well. But you were introduced to me via previous HomeGames guest, was John Beckett, JB. So those of you who remember JB's session, which was a flight of fancy, if ever there was one, which won't surprise you, Rachel, to hear. So that's how we got to know each other. But I think a lot of the people watching probably don't know FTS Global. So free hit for a minute or two. Tell us what you get up to, and then we'll dive into a couple of our meatier topics.
Super. So I'm the CEO of FTS Global and the Henkel Institute. FTS Global stands for Financial Talent Solutions. So essentially what we're trying to do is to reset financial services and make it a better place to be. through delivering coaching, culture work, transformation work. In essence, it's all about people. And the Henke Institute, Henke is the Japanese word for transformation, and we run ICF accredited coach trainings because we kind of believe in leader as coach in order to help make organizations be more sustainable and performant. Is that a good enough elevator pitch?
It is, and it's a word that we don't hear very often around here, is performant. What does performant mean?
What does performant mean? Well, at the end of the day, performant is about the money. If we're talking about financial services, it's about profit, isn't it? The big word.
Whoa.
But it's about doing that sustainably, and that's the key thing. So we're not talking about, I think it was Martin Cuff who once told me about a cricket player or a cricket coach that had actually driven the cricket team to perform so high, but then they all burnt out afterwards. So that's not what it's all about. It's about creating performance, but one that's really sustainable.
So help unpack a couple of other things, because there'll be some stuff in here that's maybe new in this context. I was asking about elevator pitch. I think that sort of was it. But I think coaching in the context of lots and lots of our kind of regular viewers, they actually do some sort of coaching. They're coaching their clients as financial planners, as opposed to folk that sell insurance or commission stuff or whatever. They might feel that they're in that coaching space already. So what do you mean by coaching? You say leader as coach. What's it? What do you take people and make them do? So
first of all, let's unpack coaching a little bit. So for me, coaching is about helping an individual hoist their own sails. So that's what a leader's coach does. It helps an individual hoist their own sails. So take ownership and responsibility. You could call it agency in an organization, that person is taking agency and responsibility. So that's what a leader's coach does. But what does coaching cover? It covers curiosity, getting really curious. It covers asking really powerful questions. It covers suspending judgment. It covers creating a safe space. It covers intuition, which is about active listening, but listening to what's not being said. So I'm kind of a bit obsessed about coaching, because I think if you're in sales, and I was in asset management, sales and marketing, it makes you a better salesperson. It makes you a more inclusive leader, because you're suspending judgment, you're getting curious, you're getting interested in the human being. So overall, all of these skills, if they get embedded in an organization, they just generally make an organization a more pleasant, more performant, more inclusive organization. And I don't need to go through the stats on inclusivity and why that's important and why it makes organizations ultimately more performant and more profitable.
Okay, so again, like some stuff to unpack as we go through in there, I think, because one of the things
you're getting curious. You're being a coach. You see, you're getting very curious. There you go.
There we are. We did have some months ago. We had a guy called Chris Budd on, and many viewers will remember that one. And he was a coach as well, and is trying to drive the industry towards wellness, I guess, is financial wellness.
Financial wellness,
is his kind of thing. So I guess that's kind of related to this. So one of the things that was kind of interesting, I thought, there as you were leading in, was that sense of transformation, the Henke Institute, and Henke means transformation in Japanese. So tell us a bit about that, because I suspect there's quite a lot of people here who have undergone either some kind of transformation in their own businesses over the last year and a half, which have been voluntary, but there's lots of either folk who are clients of big firms, so your Standard Lifes and your Scandias and whatever all of them are now called, who've been through big change programs or work for them, because we do get, there's usually quite a few folk dialing in from those businesses as well. So tell us a little bit about transformation.
So transformation. So we get involved in a lot of transformations. Typically, it could be mergers, acquisitions, or large digital transformations. Unfortunately, we often get invited at the end of the transformation, because often the focus in a transformation is on the technical side of the transformation, or it's about the profitable side of the transformation. It's about the numbers. And the last thing that people actually think about is the people side of the transformation. And actually, because it's the people side is the most complex part of any transformation. So if we can get involved in the beginning, that's great, because, you know, transformations are complex, and human beings, you know, do not like change. You know, I'm finding out right now my father is unwell. We're trying to get some help in the house to support my mum. My mum doesn't want the help. She's a human being and she's resisting change. People need to be involved in the change process. They need to have a say in that change process. So our job is to kind of involve them and include them in that change process.
That's really interesting, because if we think about some of the corporate activity maybe that's been in the sector, right? If you work for, you go ahead and name them, what have they got? A lot have been bought by private equity maybe, or have been merged with somebody and all that kind of stuff. So let's say you work for Nucleus or somebody like that, and you're finding the concept of what's going on with them being kind of subsumed into James Hay and that kind of stuff, or it could be the takeover of Novia by private equity or Parmenion, or it could be what Old Mutual has been going through and all that kind of stuff. You kind of maybe raging against the machine a little bit. You're kind of finding some of that quite hard, but to be involved, it can only ever go so deep, right? I mean, you can't stop it. You
can't stop the transformation, and sometimes the voice of resistance can be a powerful voice and a very useful voice. So, you know, our job is really to have a conversation using positive psychology, and, you know, getting people to think about what's good about a transformation or leadership or culture or whatever the topic is. Getting people to think what's good, and getting them involved, getting them to be telling us and articulating to us what can actually sort of make the difference, what can make the incremental difference in this transformation. And I'm a huge fan of incrementalism. I think it's what made the British cycling team go from being pretty darn rubbish to being pretty darn good at what they did by applying in incrementalism. So that's the work we do. It's about having a conversation and about allowing people a voice in that, and then getting the leaders to make sure that they're hearing that voice and they're articulating back what they can do and what they can't do. So again, it's getting the people involved in the transformation, and transformations are never easy. And maybe the outcome of a transformation could be an offshoring. So it could mean a person's losing their job at the end of the transformation, but the organization still needs those people to be involved and engaged in the transformation process. So not easy stuff.
No, it's not. And how do you... There's probably not an easy answer to this, right? And it's probably a naive question, but how do you stop this being kind of, I don't know, like
a whinge fest?
Yeah, a beard, right? You know, we better do something because they're moaning, so let's get somebody in and make them feel loved. Yeah. That kind of thing. Do organizations, are there examples of organizations who do this stuff really well, who really do change some things that are going on? Does that happen? Or is it kind of, look, you're going to have to suck this up and either accept it or move on?
Yeah, we've had some organisations, as I say, that have brought us in right at the beginning, and it's when we're involved from the beginning that you can really see the impact that you're having, rather than having to pick up the pieces at the end of something. So we much prefer to be brought in at the beginning. It does work. It genuinely does work. But it's not, you know, it's not a quick fix. It is about great leadership. It's about great conversations, and it's about the facilitators having the skill set to manage the people in the room, and make sure that they feel like they're being heard, and that they recognise what's going to happen thereafter. So yeah.
So those of us that are kind of listening to you and have history in big organizations, as I do, and lots of others as well, but not everybody here, I kind of recognize a lot of it, and I recognize that there are HR teams that will be involved in various things, and there are forums, and there might be drop boxes where you can send feedback, and all kinds of things can get put in place. when you've got 5,000 people or 1,000 people or whatever it might be. But lots and lots and lots of advisor firms in particular, as you know, as well as anybody, are 5, 10, 20 man firms or person firms, I apologize. And it's kind of, obviously they're unlikely to bring in your company, but they go through transitions and changes all the time as well. What kind of lessons can smaller firms kind of take? Is there any of this that works if you're just a small, tight-knit band?
Yeah. So whilst we're on the football topic, as we've been talking, it's football tonight. Well, I love the fact you're drinking Iron Brew. Fantastic. There
Absolutely.
you go. There you go. So what you've got, here is a lot of leaders that are player managers, as opposed to managers. And, I'm a player manager as well, Mark, and it's not easy being a player manager. So I think for those firms, what are the top tips I'd give? Number one is creating a culture of dynamic feedback. What does dynamic feedback mean? It means having conversations with the people that you work with, giving feedback really regularly, but giving it to people in a space that is safe. So making sure, it looks like you've read a really interesting question there, Mark.
Second part of George's question. Yeah, we'll come back to it, George. We'll come back to it. No, we can't keep going.
I answered your question. So it's about creating a safe space. It's about giving dynamic feedback. Often in small firms, you actually become quite friendly with some of the people that you're working with. And that can be challenging in its own right. So you've got to be able to create a space where you say, Mark, with your permission, I'd like to have a conversation with you where I'm going to be fairly direct with you. Are you feeling okay for me to be fairly direct with you today in the way in which I'm giving you some feedback? And you'll hopefully go, yes, I'm okay with that. And then that allows me as a leader to be able to be open, transparent, give you the feedback, ask you some coaching questions. How did that land with you? What are you learning from that feedback? So that's the way in which I'd encourage some of the smaller firms to work with some of the people that work with them. And having a conversation, as long as you create a safe space, most people are very willing and open to have that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's really interesting. I'm not sure who A is. Thanks for not giving us your name, A, about definitions of performance and stuff. But I don't know. I don't really know what you mean, A. But fill out your name and let's get into it if you've got an actual question to ask. George is a faithful watcher and one of our
Hello,
favorites.
George.
Hello, George.
Hello,
now,
George.
George likes to ask questions in quite a direct way, don't you, George? And I like this is one of his nicer ones. But I do get the sense that, again, I think it's a small business thing, and it might be to do with kind of advisors and all that kind of stuff, and the kind of people that they are. But some of the kind of language and that kind of stuff that goes around this kind of world where we start thinking in HR terms, and there is a kind of kind of taxonomy and all that kind of stuff that goes with it, and it doesn't necessarily sit that comfortably for small businesses who are just trying to make sure that the client's pension gets transferred from here to there, or the income gets paid on time, or whatever it may be. So he's expressing, I guess, a kind of there's just been too much of what people might call PC language, or I think what they're saying is the language that goes with that in corporate world isn't one that we can relate to. Is there a way through that stuff so that it doesn't get caught up in something that people buck against in language, but you still get into stuff that genuinely does matter?
I mean, I like what George is saying, because I hate some of this call it PC language, and I think we in financial services have a duty to be able to make a lot of things simpler, and HR speak as well needs to become simpler. What I'd say to George, if we use the word sort of inclusive, which is a little bit trendy, a little bit fashionable, can be used a lot in HR speak, but But the reality is a lot of clients for probably Georgia's firm and others, are going to be a different type of individual from the type of individuals that they are right now. So in other words, the people that will have the wealth in the future will be different. And so being able to connect with them, engage with them, have conversations with them is going to be really, really important in the future. And that's what coaching can bring.
That's interesting. And Neil's made a good point off the back of that, I think, which is kind of fit your own oxygen mask before you fit anyone else's, right?
Yeah, so, spot on, Neil.
Do you, one of the things that kind of, I don't know, maybe it's just getting old or something, but one of the things I have noticed is the change as I've watched people that I've known for a very long time get further up in corporate life. You watch changes happen, and to the people that work for them, they maybe just perceived as a hard ass or hatchet person or a decent person or whatever. And you're like, well, hang on, I knew you when you were 25 and you were lying on the floor half pissed and whatever. And something's happened here along the way. And I suspect you've made changes that you're not fully comfortable with. So I guess where that goes is how much of the coaching stuff, if you're going to try and bring people along in that kind of way, how much of it is about you sorting your own head out before you have those conversations? And can you fake it? Or do you genuinely have to be together yourself?
So if I understand your question, what you're saying
is... I do. So, if you are understanding it in your head of me.
So if I understand your question, Mark, it's about, what's the reason people are changing who they are authentically when they reach a certain point in an organization? Is that your question?
I think, yeah, that's the first part of it. But given that, are they in a position, if they're uncomfortable or having to fake it because they're in a role that's new to them or whatever else, but that they're required to now look after a team of people? How much time do they have to put into kind of sorting their own shit out before they start trying to work on other people? This all plays into, I think, the fact that oftentimes, and this will be familiar to everyone, I think, classic would be in a sales organization for a life co, the best sales guy gets promoted to head of sales, and very often is the very, very last person that should be head of sales because they're brilliant at selling and really appalling at all the other stuff.
So to answer your question, you definitely need to sort your own stuff out. Definitely need to sort your own stuff out first. To become a really good leader as coach, you've got to be able to self-reflect. You've got to dig deep. It takes a bit of time. It's not something you can do overnight. You've got to reflect on who you are as a human being. And my honest view is for financial services companies to attract future talent and to retain talent. There has to be a shift in how things are managed from a cultural perspective. I'll give you two stories. So a guy called Jim came to us to do a little stage, an internship with us. First class honours degree in economics, zero interest at all in financial services because he said there's no purpose to it, loads of scandals, greedy, and it's not sexy. But, he did want money. But he didn't want 14 hours a day, and he didn't want to be disempowered, and he didn't want to deal with the politics, and he didn't want to be treated as a disposable resource and be micromanaged. So that's why he was working for different industries. So that's Jim. And then my other story is 47-year-old CEO that I know. He spent 30 years in banking, built a bank from scratch. And for the same reason as that 21-year-old, he figured it out when he was 47 and said when he was 21, that he decided he wanted to become an entrepreneur and earn much less money than he was earning before. So I think organizations, they're losing talent with years of experience, and they're also possibly not able to attract that future set of talent, which is so important to the future of the industry.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Something we've talked about before is next generation and all that kind of stuff. And for lots of the business owners on here, succession planning, you know, 1 or 2 kind of steps down the road, that's a thing. I mean, you can just sell out, but if you want to grow your own operational redundancy, which is I think quite a lot of business owners quite like the idea that the business carries on, but they gradually become less important to it. I know I do, though I'm pretty unimportant already. In really every way. Just ask my family. But that's a tough thing to do. But we have talked a bit about kind of getting talent into the industry, and we've chatted before, Rachel, about a lot of the previous training courses and all that kind of stuff that were a good kind of graduate thing. Most of those have gone. I started, I was telling you the other day, I started on the Scottish Widows graduate training scheme.
Yeah, and I started on the Save and Prosper scheme.
And it was brilliant, right? It was amazing. I sat the advanced FPC at a ridiculously young age. I have a bloody clue what to do with it at that point, but you know, we got all the training in the world and learned all our stuff. And a lot of that's away now. Although there are some organizations, St. James Place and True Potential and some others that are trying to do some of that. So these are the big advisor selling organizations. But the Mike's, yeah. But I mean, is it real? The thing that I wonder sometimes, right, is there's a trope that says that younger folk don't want to come into the industry because millennials want meaning and that kind of stuff, and there's none of it here when they could be doing something else. I'm not sure exactly what that would be. But my experience of many people is what they want is a job and the ability to pay rent and maybe have a car and basic stuff. Is it real when you're looking at organizations and what they're going through? Is that purpose thing actually real, or is it kind of bollocks?
It's a really good question. The people that I've spoken to, it's really, really important. And I think the whole ESG thing, although I think the whole ESG thing needs a bit of branding, but we could go on for days about that. But the ESG thing certainly has created a bit of a, how shall I say, made it a little more attractive for some younger people. That's for sure. But you know, if I go back to Jim, you know, my first class honours degree, you know, he, as I say, he does want to earn the money. He's mucking around with crypto, you know, but was very, very clear, you know, I don't want to work for financial services because it's boring. You know, it is how he's thinking. And I actually wrote an article for Funds Europe a couple of years ago, all about why our kids don't want to be bankers. And
why don't they? What was your finding?
Because of the lack of connection to purpose, because of the stories that have been told. And remember, we're human beings; we love stories. You know, the stories that have been told in the last 15 years are stories of, you know, financial crisis, stories of Madoff, you know, stories. So people connect with stories, and the stories are not great ones. And yet, in actual fact, doesn't financial services have one of the best purposes ever? You know, financial services, you know, will hopefully help me or my mum or, you know, whoever have a decent retirement. You know, hopefully it will be able to help me pay for my daughter's future. So I think it's got a great purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked across lots of bits in this sector, and funny enough, the platform stuff and the kind of wealth management stuff is one of the bits where I find it hardest to get the purpose right, because it's about making rich people very slightly richer, optimizing the richness. And they'll do what they want to do with it, which might be pass it on, or maybe philanthropy for some of the wealthier people and that stuff, which is worthwhile. The one that I managed, I think, in my career that I got on board with the most was when I was doing workplace stuff and group pensions, where people who would never engage with financial services just had money put in for them and put money in themselves and just had to go, oh, fuck, I hope this is all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that seemed to me to be something that you could kind of get next to. Sam's asking something interesting here, I think, which is about maybe this is just our sector. I'm sure it must be other sectors too. Kind of go, well, how will we get graduates interesting? She's saying, actually, what's so great about graduates? So do you see, or do you encourage people when they're thinking about diversity of thought and getting organizations into a better place to look past the fact that someone's coming out of a university or a college, starting them younger, or career changers, or that kind of stuff?
I mean, it doesn't have to be graduates. It has to be people who've got the right attitude. I think, again, don't get me onto education, or we'd be here for another hour on how the education system needs to change. So it's not about them being a graduate per se, but it's about somebody who's got the right attitude to people, to work, to change, to transformation, and is actually sociable, because it's all about people. Again, I'll say that again. It's all about people, and it's all about connection. So, yeah, graduate programs are great, but what about some school leaver programs and taking some school leavers on? What about hiring some older people into the industry that actually really want to give back? So there's lots of ways I think the industry could do something. But people are attracted to learn, which is why the graduate programs were so brilliant, because we had a chance to learn and connect with other people. We had a community, didn't we?
Yeah, and you had peers that you could, it was kind of safe, because it may shock people to know this, but we do prep these kind of these interviews, and one of the things that I was kind of struggling with before, as a phrase Rachel's used earlier on, was safe space. Yeah. Which I was like, I'm not sure that means very much to me, but that was probably one, wasn't it? Was your peers on the grad scheme, because it wasn't a it wasn't a competition-based thing. You weren't all vying for 4 jobs or whatever at the end of it. I think if you were good enough, then they'd probably keep you and work out what to do with you next. And so you did have somewhere safe that you could say, I haven't got a clue what's going on.
Absolutely. You've got peers. And, I'm still in touch with these people that I larked around with and went to Wales on outward bound courses and things like that. We're still in touch after all these years. So it creates a community, it creates friendships, it creates a network.
Does it act, as kind of apropos of nothing, but does it act as an inhibitor of things moving forward, though? So the networks and the stuff that you put in place at that point persists through. And we see it, you see it, in the IFA world a lot, with a load of guys that are ex-AMP or MPI or ex-Scott Prov guys, or, we were all together in the PRU or whatever. We all came through that kind of Tide advisor world and then became IFAs later on. If your network is kind of frozen in aspect there, is it all good? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, you've always got to be thinking about diversity. And when I talk about diversity, I'm talking about diversity in the broadest sense, which is, at the end of the day, why does diversity make us organisations more performant? It's because you've got diversity of thought. At the end of the day, real diversity is diversity of thinking. So, we need to be reaching out to people who are older than us, younger than us, different creeds, different colours, males, female, whatever it is. It's because people are thinking differently. And what comes from people thinking differently is innovation. And it's innovation that, again, can create growth and that performance that we've been talking about.
Yeah. So Chris in the little comment bit, thank you, Chris, for that. Mentions, because I mentioned the thing you'd said to me a little while ago about command and control being dead, and reminds me that I haven't dragged you into that yet. So let's do that. So he says, how does the concept and approach align with cultural transformation and change in your practice? So first of all, let's talk about what you meant when you said command and control is dead, particularly as a function of the pandemic.
Yeah, so I think definitely as a function of the pandemic, command and control is now dead in the water. In fact, COVID definitely accelerated it, because it's impossible when you're virtual to be able to command and control in the same way that you might have been able to do physically in the office. And it's made a lot of leaders, it's shaken a lot of leaders up because they've been used to a certain way of leading, and the way in which you lead when you're leading a remote office is very, very different from if you're not leading if you're working remotely. So I call it that there's a sea change with a C, that, you know, it's now about collaborating, and it's connecting, and it's coaching, and it's care. You know, because there has been a lot of mental health challenges as a result of this pandemic. I'm coaching a lot of senior leaders at the moment that, you know, have struggled, you know, and again, they're human beings. They've got their home life, they've got their work life, and you know, COVID's made it very, very challenging for people. So there's has to be a sea change in leadership, and I think the other thing that has to shift in this change has to be this drive for shareholder value. And, you know, shareholders themselves need to become more ethically aware and, you know, understand what the impact is. We briefly mentioned BrewDog the other day, and some of the challenges, you know, with BrewDog. So for anybody who doesn't know, BrewDog, they're a fast expanding craft beer firm, and
exponentially expanding craft beer firm.
Yeah, and you know, allegedly workers were bullied and treated like objects in that particular scenario. And what happened was 61 former workers alleged that they cut off corners on health and safety and created a toxic culture. And again, that was because it was being driven by sort of shareholder value. And you know, I think there was crowdfunding, if I understand, and then some of the people who'd done the crowdfunding are now going, what on earth have I done, investing in something that was toxic? So yeah,
I mean, it's hard to escape that, because quarterly earnings calls are quarterly earnings calls, and I think lots of listed businesses would rather not be listed businesses, but they wanted the capital, and this kind of comes with it. But how do you get then, if command and control as a kind of management style is sort of dead, which I guess is, you know, what that means to me, tell me if I'm wrong, is I've got control of everything. I know exactly what needs done, and I dole it out like sweeties.
Correct.
Right, you go and do that. You go and do that.
Correct.
And tell me when you've done, and I'll give you another bit to do.
Yeah.
Which sounds like a shit way of working anyway to me. It requires a degree of organization I just don't have.
Yeah.
So what, like, obviously,
so what replaces it?
Like in a practical sense, though, because, you know, we've got shit to do and stuff. Clients need stuff and whatever else. And thinking again of the firm that's trying to make sure the income's getting paid on time. How do you get out of task-based kind of world?
Yeah. So Daniel Goleman said there were sort of 6 leadership styles, and the one I like is the coaching leadership style. It's the one that was used the least, because you actually need some training in a coaching style of leadership. Now, coaching leadership style can't be used in all cases. If there's a fire in the building, you need an autocratic leadership style. You need to say, get out of the room.
Yeah.
That's a fact. But if you want to create what I call agency, some people say empowerment. It's not really empowerment, it's agency. It's where, you know, people are sort of stepping up. People are becoming a collective. People are taking real ownership and responsibility for building the organization. So they're not having to wait constantly for instructions. You know, they're coming to the leadership and helping to drive the business. So that's the kind of culture of hoist your own sails that a coaching leadership style eventually brings. But it's not something that will happen overnight. It takes a bit of time, but just like sustainable performance, that takes a bit of time to implement. But once it's implemented, it works.
Yeah. And that sounds a bit of an echo of what Sarah's saying down here. It's about attitude and productive team dynamics. That's kind of what you're talking about in the safe environment.
Yeah.
We've definitely had an interesting kind of in our little company. We have a couple of interesting experiences with that, where we've kind of said, listen, it should be safe for us to say, well, we think we need to do that differently, or frankly, that's probably not up to par. That why don't we do it this way? And so we should be safe in having those conversations with each other. See, actually doing it is very different. It's very different because work is so personal.
Work is so personal, and to create a safe space can sometimes take, with a team, can take half an hour. You've got to spend the time to truly create the safe space to be able to have those open and honest and direct conversations. But once the space has been created, then it's so powerful, and you can drive a lot of things forward. So look forward to seeing how you get on with it.
Yeah, well, I've clearly screwed it up so far. There is one story I remember. I think I might have told this one before, but it's worth saying. We were talking once, this is some years ago, about how things could have gone better with one particular thing, which was obviously brilliant because we did it, but could have been better, even better than it was, if you know what I mean. And one of our team members said, well, if you would relax your white-knuckled grip on everything so the rest of us could get on with
command and control,
then we might have a shot. And there was this kind of moment of like, oh shit, as everyone, and of course the individual was correct, and she's a very wise and intelligent person. I sat for a moment going, okay. And I'm not, I don't know if I was been entirely successful in doing that, but definitely tried to do it in parts. But that was kind of interesting, because that individual, I think, thought, do you know what, bollocks to waiting for permission for that kind of stuff. I'm just going to say it because this is clearly, doing my head in, and it needs said, and it was good. It was a good, also extremely funny. Later.
Well, he obviously felt there was enough of a safe space to be able to say it.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. I guess so, or just didn't care anymore. Or I've tried to instill fear and respect in everyone that works for us. To me personally as an individual, but I may not have managed that either. I think fear is obviously the best motivator.
Oh,
but, not really. We're coming up pretty much on the end of our time. Yeah, Mark's pointing out and I guess that's the maybe just kind of one other bit in there, and it's one of our own, is Mike just asking about home working, and I guess we're going to have more hybrid working. For most businesses are going to have more of that. So for anybody on the call who's leading a team or leading a business, you got any kind of pearls of wisdom that help us do that a bit better now it's not novel anymore, and it does look like it's going to settle into a slightly different new normal? What do we do to try and be better?
What do we do as leaders when we're remote working or when we're hybrid working? Is that your question?
I think hybrid particularly.
When we're hybrid working, well, I think there's no point in encouraging people to come to the office to send emails, would be my first comment. So, coming to the office should be a joyous occasion, and it should be that opportunity to collaborate, be really creative, show each other we care. It's nice to go to the office. I really look forward to going to the office to see, a couple of my colleagues. I've got a lot of colleagues that are in other countries, so I can't see them physically, but an opportunity to go to the office is wonderful, because we're human beings and we need other humans. So my invitation for companies is encourage people to come to the office for the collaborative stuff. Don't encourage people to come to the office to write emails.
Oh, well, that sounds very sensible. And the fewer emails in all of our lives, I suspect, the happier we will be. Listen, let's call it there. It is 15:15. Thank you so much for coming on, Rachel. I think I'm going to say return the favor, but do a very, very poor version back on one of your podcasts soon. So look forward to that. Next week, everybody, we've got Seckle on. So we're right back into the industry and back into the guts of technical stuff, and then that's going to be about advisors operating their own platform, which is what Seco goes on to and is a bit of a hot topic at the moment. So I'll be doing that one as well. So come and join us next week. Meanwhile, thank you so much to Rachel. Thanks everyone for joining us. Have a good week. Good luck tonight.
Thank you, Mark.
We'll enjoy it. Whatever happens in an England-Italy final actually would be a really wonderful thing to watch, I think.
Yeah.
All the best, everybody.